Currently, I reside on the small island of Aruba. And for those of you who don't know, Aruba is really close to South America, but super far from my actual home country, which is the United States. More specifically in the United States, I lived in Alabama, or even more specifically, I lived in a small town called Millbrook, Alabama. And so, being in Alabama, you realize that it's a very conservative state. So, what that means is people are very traditional in that state. And me being as liberal and outspoken as I am, I often encounter many disagreements with my counterparts. So, most disagreements were fine. I mean, they were just like any other disagreement. We would talk about it, and then I would get over it, and then that would be that. But I used to get comments ranging from Sania pitching a fit from my fellow peers, or one time my teacher told me that, Sania, you can't talk to me until your brain was fully developed. And he was referencing to my 15-year-old brain, which is just mind baffling to me. But like I said before, I got over it. But there was one comment in particular that was made by this student, and really, I don't understand how we got on the topic, but we ended up getting on this topic in history class about slavery. And I was trying to explain to this student how slavery happened and what was going on, and I guess my ranting kind of hurt her feelings or was getting on her nerves because she told me that slavery happened years ago, Sanaya. You should just get over it. Now, some of you may be thinking, who could possibly say something like that and actually mean it? Well, I thought the same thing. So at that moment, I was absolutely and utterly speechless. But right now, not so much. So Ashley, you're absolutely right. Slavery did happen many years ago, but I promise you, I will never get over it. Slavery happened years ago, yes, but now it's still happening, and it took on the name of mass incarceration, or broader, the criminal justice system. So what I mean by that is the 13th Amendment states, in simple terms, that involuntary servitude is abolished except when you are committed of a crime. So America found a loophole, and they ran with it. More specifically, prosecutors are twice as likely to try to seek the maximum sentence for a certain crime for African Americans as they do for white people. Among people who receive a mandatory minimum sentence in 2011, 38% were Latino and 31% were African Americans. Also, in those times, there were certain limitations that were put on African Americans, which more specifically the grandfather clause. And for those of you who don't know what the grandfather clause is, it was a clause that stated that if your grandfather voted, then therefore you could vote. And America made that clause because they knew that African Americans at the time, their grandfathers were slaves. So they decided, we're going to give them the right to vote, but really it wasn't the right to vote. And so I'm not here to give you guys a history lesson, so I'm going to explain to you how now this relates to back then. So felony disenfranchisement is the process of taking away a felon's right to vote. And like I previously stated, since African Americans make up 32% of the American population, 56% of them are in prisons. 32% make up the U.S. population, that is nationwide, yet they still make up 56% of incarcerated people in 2015. So that is 56% of African Americans in America that have permanently lost their right to vote. So I'll close with this. America has been stuck in this constant loop, and in order to move forward, we have to get uncomfortable. And getting uncomfortable actually helps in the long run. We cannot sit in a room with people who affirm what we affirm. It would not bring about change, and honestly, it would be pretty boring. So I learned at the young, tender age of 15 that the only way you can get past things are to attack things right on the head and have these conversations with your peers. And please do not be ashamed. Please do not be scared if people don't think the same way you think, because you never know. And I say that because my teacher, the same teacher that told me not to talk to him when my brain was fully developed, was also the same teacher that told me he had tremendous amounts of respect for me after I brought up these conversations. So you never know who you're talking to. You could be talking to the next president of the United States, and he could take your idea and change the world with it. Thank you.